I still remember the exact sound of the bus pulling away. Not because I was getting on it. Because my son was driving away, while I stood alone with one old suitcase, believing he'd be back in 5 minutes. He never came back. 5 years later, the same son who abandoned me looked into my eyes from a hospital bed and whispered through tears, "Mom, if you don't help me, I'm going to die." And for one terrible second, I wasn't sure I wanted to. My name is Margaret Collins, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 63 years old, and if you'd met me before everything fell apart, you would have called me lucky. I lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. My husband, David, had been the kind of man who fixed everything with duct tape and optimism. When he died from a sudden heart attack 12 years ago, I thought I'd already experienced the worst pain life could offer. I was wrong. Because grief from losing a husband is cruel. Grief from losing your child while they are still alive. That's something else entirely. My son, Ethan, was 34 when he left me. He wasn't a bad little boy. That's the strange part. As a child, he'd bring home injured birds and cry if a stray dog looked hungry. He used to crawl into my bed after thunderstorms and whisper, "Mom, nothing bad can happen as long as you're here." I believed him. Maybe that's why I ignored all the little changes after he married Vanessa. She wasn't openly cruel. Not at first. She smiled with perfectly white teeth. She hugged people without ever really touching them. She always sounded polite. But every sentence carried a tiny hook. "Oh, Margaret, you still shop there. You still drive that old car. You really don't need such a big house anymore." Little comments. Little cuts. Individually harmless. Together, they slowly taught Ethan to see me as a burden instead of his mother. After David passed away, the house became painfully quiet. Some evenings I'd cook too much food without realizing it. I'd set 2 plates on the table before remembering. One would always stay empty. Ethan visited every Sunday during the first year. Then every other Sunday. Then once a month. Eventually. Only birthdays. Only holidays. Then, whenever Vanessa thought it looked good, I made excuses for him. He's busy. They have careers. The grandkids keep them occupied. Mothers become experts at lying to themselves. One rainy afternoon, Ethan arrived alone. That should have made me happy. Instead, it terrified me. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. Wrinkled shirt. Hands trembling around a coffee mug. "Mom," he said quietly. "We need to talk." No child says those 4 words unless they're carrying something heavy. I smiled anyway. "Did you eat?" He forced a laugh. "You always ask that first. Because hungry people make bad decisions." For a moment, he looked like my little boy again. Then his shoulders slumped. "We're selling the house." I blinked. "Our house?" "No, yours." The room became strangely silent. "I don't understand." He rubbed his forehead. "The property taxes are high. Maintenance is expensive. Living alone isn't safe. I've lived here 38 years. I know. I can manage. You don't have to." His voice was rehearsed. Every sentence sounded memorized. Like he'd practiced in front of a mirror. "We found somewhere better." "What somewhere?" "A retirement community." My stomach tightened. "I'm not ready for that. It's temporary." "I don't want temporary. It's only until things settle down." "What things?" He looked away. Our finances. There it was. The truth hiding beneath polite words. Over the next hour, pieces slowly came together. Vanessa's online clothing business had collapsed. They'd invested nearly everything. Then borrowed more. Credit cards. Personal loans. A second mortgage. Even money Ethan never told me about. They weren't moving me because they worried about me. They needed my house. If they sold it, they could survive. I stared at my wedding photo hanging above the fireplace. David smiled back at me, forever frozen at 30 years old. I promised your father I'd never leave this house. Ethan sighed. Dad's gone. The words landed harder than he realized. I looked at him. So am I. His face softened for only a second. Then it disappeared. 3 weeks later, the house was sold. Everything happened so fast that I barely had time to understand it. Furniture disappeared. Family photographs went into boxes. Neighbors waved goodbye, believing I'd chosen this new chapter. No one knew I hadn't signed the papers willingly. Ethan handled everything. Every signature. Every document. Every decision. It's for the best, he kept saying. People always repeat that sentence when they're trying to convince themselves. The morning we left, I carried one faded blue suitcase. Everything else had been donated. Or sold. Or thrown away. As Ethan loaded the car, I turned around one last time. The porch swing David built. The maple tree Ethan climbed. The kitchen window where I'd watched snowstorms with hot chocolate. All gone. Not yet physically. But emotionally. Already gone. The drive lasted almost 2 hours. At least. That's what I thought. Instead of turning toward the retirement community, Ethan pulled into an old bus station near Dayton. I frowned. Why are we stopping here? He couldn't look at me. I just need to take care of something. What? It'll only take 5 minutes. He carried my suitcase inside. Bought me a cup of coffee. Sat me on a wooden bench. Then squeezed my shoulder. I'll be right back. I smiled. Drive safely. He nodded once. Then walked outside. I watched him through the dusty glass doors. He got into his SUV. Started the engine. Stopped. For a second. I thought he was coming back. Instead, he drove away. Slowly. Without looking back. I kept watching the parking lot. 5 minutes passed. Then 20. Then an hour. Finally, a station employee walked over. His voice was gentle. Are you waiting for someone? I swallowed. My son. He looked toward the empty parking lot. Then back at me. And the sadness in his eyes told me something my heart still refused to believe. My son wasn't coming back. But what I discovered inside my suitcase a few moments later was even worse. My hands were shaking when I reached for the zipper. At first, I didn't even know why. Maybe I wanted to distract myself. Maybe I wanted to believe Ethan had left me enough clothes for wherever we were going. Maybe I just needed proof that this nightmare wasn't real. The old blue suitcase had traveled with our family for nearly 20 years. It had gone on beach vacations, camping trips, and once all the way to Niagara Falls. Now it sat on the cracked floor of a nearly empty bus station. Alone. Just like me. I slowly pulled the zipper open. On top was a neatly folded sweater. Underneath, 2 pairs of pants. A toothbrush. A bottle of my blood pressure medicine. Then, a white envelope. My name was written on it in Ethan's handwriting. For one impossible second, hope returned. Maybe he'd had an emergency. Maybe he left a note explaining everything. Maybe he was coming back. I opened it. Inside was exactly one sheet of paper. Mom. I'm sorry. Vanessa said this is the only way we can move forward. I know you'll hate me, but someday you'll understand. There's $400 in the envelope. It should help until you figure something out. Please don't try to find us. Ethan. That was it. No address. No phone number. No promise. Just $400. To replace a lifetime of being his mother. The letter slipped from my fingers onto the floor. I couldn't even cry. The pain was too large for tears. The station employee had returned. He looked to be in his late 50s, wearing a faded name tag that read Frank. You don't look well. I tried to smile. My son, he's gone. Frank glanced toward the letter. He didn't ask to read it. He didn't ask questions. Instead, he quietly sat beside me. My daughter stopped talking to me for almost 8 years, he said softly. I know what family silence feels like. Something about those words broke the wall inside me. I covered my face. I don't understand, I whispered. I raised him better than this. Frank nodded slowly. I believe you. No judgment. No pity. Just belief. Sometimes that's enough to keep a person standing. That evening, Frank helped me contact the retirement community Ethan had mentioned. They had no reservation. No paperwork. No record of my name. My chest tightened. He had lied about that too. Frank called every nearby hotel. Most were full. The cheapest room available cost nearly half the cash Ethan had left. I couldn't afford many nights. I'll figure something out, I said. You shouldn't have to tonight. Frank reached into his wallet and handed me a business card. My sister owns a boarding house. I can't accept charity. It's not charity. He smiled. It's family helping family. I almost corrected him. But at that moment, his kindness felt more like family than my own son had. The boarding house belonged to Evelyn Brooks. She was 71. Short. Silver-haired. Always wearing bright yellow cardigans that somehow made gloomy days seem lighter. She welcomed me without asking uncomfortable questions. You can stay here until you're on your feet, she said. We've all had storms. Her house wasn't fancy. Just 6 rented rooms, old hardwood floors that creaked with every step, and a kitchen that always smelled like fresh bread. The other residents were ordinary people starting over. A retired truck driver. A young teacher after a divorce. A nurse caring for her grandson. Nobody judged anyone else's past. That first night, I cried into my pillow until sunrise. Not because I missed my house. I missed believing my son loved me. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. I searched for Ethan online. Nothing. His social media accounts disappeared. His phone number was disconnected. Even mutual friends acted confused. It's like they vanished, one neighbor told me. I finally stopped searching. Not because I'd given up. Because every unanswered call reopened the wound. Money became my next battle. I couldn't live forever on $400. My social security covered only the basics. So I started looking for work. At 63. With aching knees. And no recent job history. The first bakery rejected me. The grocery store wanted someone younger. A clothing shop said I was overqualified. I laughed after hearing that. It sounded kinder than saying, too old. One afternoon, I walked into a small library. The manager, Rachel Monroe, noticed me helping a little boy reach a book on the top shelf. "You've done that before," she said. "I raised a son." Rachel smiled. "We need someone who loves people more than computers." I started the following Monday. The pay wasn't much. But every paycheck felt like a tiny piece of dignity returning. Children became my favorite part of the job. One little girl named Lucy came every Thursday. She always checked out books about astronauts. "Do you want to go to space?" I asked. She shook her head. "My mom says dreams are free. So I collect them." I laughed so hard I nearly cried. Lucy reminded me of Ethan. The version of him before adulthood hardened something inside him. Every Thursday, she hugged me before leaving. One afternoon she asked, "Do you have grandchildren?" I smiled. "I think so." "You think?" "I haven't met them." She frowned. "That's sad." "It is." Then she grabbed my hand. "Well, you can borrow me." Children say impossible things like they're perfectly reasonable. For the first time in months. I smiled without pretending. 2 years passed. Then 3. Then 4. Life slowly stitched itself back together. Not perfectly. Scars never disappear. But they stop bleeding. I rented a tiny apartment near the library. Bought second-hand furniture. Started growing flowers on my balcony. Evelyn became my closest friend. Frank visited every Sunday for coffee. Without realizing it, I had built another family. One chosen by kindness instead of blood. Exactly 5 years after the bus station. It was raining again. I had just finished shelving books when Rachel called from the front desk. "Maggie." "Yes?" "There's someone here asking for you." "I don't know anyone expecting me." Rachel hesitated. "He says." She lowered her voice. "He's your son." My heartbeat stopped. Every sound in the library disappeared. Slowly, I walked toward the entrance. A man stood near the doors. Thinner than I remembered. His expensive clothes were gone. His shoulders were bent. His hair showed streaks of gray that hadn't been there before. The moment our eyes met, he dropped to his knees. People around us gasped. Tears poured down his face. "Mom." His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." I stared at him. 5 years. Not one phone call. Not one birthday card. Not one Christmas. Now he was here. Crying. Begging. But before I could answer, a woman rushed through the library doors carrying a folder full of medical papers. She looked at me with desperate eyes. "Mrs. Collins." I nodded cautiously. She took a trembling breath. "My name is Dr. Sarah Bennett." Then she said the words that turned my entire world upside down. "Your son has less than 3 months to live, unless you agree to help him." The library became so quiet that I could hear the rain tapping against the windows. I looked from the doctor to Ethan. He was still on his knees. His shoulders shook as if he no longer had the strength to stand. For 5 years, I had imagined this moment. Sometimes, in those lonely nights, I pictured him knocking on my door with flowers. Other times, I imagined myself slamming the door in his face. But never. Not once. Did I imagine a doctor standing beside him, saying his life depended on me. What do you mean? I asked. Dr. Sarah Bennett held the folder tightly against her chest. Ethan has advanced kidney failure. The words barely registered. He needs a transplant. I blinked. There are waiting lists. There are. So why are you here? She hesitated. His blood type is uncommon. We've tested immediate family members we could locate. She looked directly at me. You are his closest possible match. I stared at Ethan. He finally managed to stand. He looked older than 39. Not just physically. His eyes carried the weight of years spent running from something he could never escape. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know I don't deserve to ask. No. My voice surprised even me. You don't. His head lowered. I know. 5 years of pain rose inside me like a storm. You left me at a bus station. I know. You sold my home. I know. You told me not to look for you. I know. You erased me. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I know. People around us pretended to read books while secretly listening. Rachel quietly guided the other visitors toward another section of the library, giving us privacy. Dr. Bennett remained silent. She understood this wasn't a medical conversation anymore. It was a family one. I wrote to you, Ethan finally said. I laughed. A bitter, broken laugh. A single letter with $400. I wanted to write more. So why didn't you? He closed his eyes. Because every day that passed, it became harder. No. I stepped closer. It became easier. He couldn't answer. Because we both knew I was right. Dr. Bennett gently interrupted. I don't want to pressure you. She sounded sincere. But Ethan doesn't have much time. I looked at her. Where's his wife? Silence. Then Ethan answered. She left. Of course she did. When? 3 years ago. What happened? He gave a sad smile. The money ran out. I waited. There was another man. The irony landed between us without either of us saying it aloud. The woman he'd chosen over his mother had abandoned him too. I lost everything, Ethan admitted. The business failed. I know. How? I asked around once. He nodded. We filed bankruptcy. I know. We lost the new house. I know. I've been renting a room ever since. I folded my arms. And suddenly you remembered your mother. His face crumpled. No. He looked directly into my eyes. I remembered you every single day. I wanted to believe him. I hated that part of myself. That evening, I agreed to hear the full medical explanation. Nothing more. We met in a small consultation room at the hospital. Dr. Bennett spread several scans across the table. Ethan's kidneys are functioning at less than 10%. She explained dialysis. Waiting lists. Compatibility. Recovery. Risks. Finally she looked at me. You would need extensive testing first. And if I'm a match? The surgery could save his life. Could. Not would. Every surgery carries risk. Especially for someone my age. I quietly asked. What happens if I say no? Dr. Bennett answered honestly. We continue dialysis. For how long? She looked at Ethan. Probably not long enough. That night I couldn't sleep. Instead, I walked. The streets were empty. The air smelled like wet pavement. Without thinking, my feet carried me to the small park, where I often read on weekends. I sat on a bench. 5 years earlier, I'd sat on another bench, waiting for a son who never returned. Now that same son wanted me to give him a piece of my body. Life had a cruel sense of symmetry. Couldn't sleep either. I looked up. Frank, holding 2 cups of coffee. I had a feeling I'd find you here. I smiled weakly. You always do. He sat beside me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally he asked, "Is it true?" I nodded. "He needs my kidney." Frank whistled softly. "That's something. I don't know what to do." He handed me the coffee. "You know what I like about old trees." I frowned. "What?" "They keep giving shade. Even to people who once tried to cut them down." I looked at him. "Are you telling me to forgive him?" "No." Frank shook his head. "I'm telling you not to let his choices decide the kind of person you become." The next morning, Evelyn visited my apartment carrying homemade muffins. She had already heard. News travels quickly in small towns. "I suppose everyone has advice," she said. "They do. And none of it helps." I smiled. "Not really." She reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a young man in military uniform. "My son. You never told me you had a son." "He died 30 years ago." I looked at her in surprise. "He was 24. She gently touched the photo. "If someone had told me giving him 1 kidney would save his life." Her voice cracked. "I would have given him both." She wasn't comparing our situations. She was reminding me of something only a mother understands. Love doesn't disappear just because it's betrayed. Sometimes, that's what makes the betrayal hurt so much. 3 days later, I returned to the hospital. Ethan looked surprised to see me. "I've made one decision," I said. Hope flashed across his face. "I'm willing to be tested." His eyes filled with tears. "But don't mistake that for forgiveness." The hope dimmed. "I understand." "No." I looked straight at him. "I don't think you do." He nodded slowly. "You're right." The tests lasted nearly 6 hours. Blood work, scans, heart examinations, endless questions. By evening, I was exhausted. Dr. Bennett finally entered the room carrying fresh results. She wasn't smiling. My heart sank. She sat down across from us. "There are complications." Ethan gripped the edge of his chair. "What kind of complications?" The doctor took a slow breath before answering. "Mrs. Collins is a match." Relief washed across Ethan's face. Then Dr. Bennett continued. "But there's another medical finding, one neither of you was expecting." She turned toward me. "Mrs. Collins, your own health may be in far more danger than anyone realized." For a moment, I forgot why I had come. I stared at Dr. Sarah Bennett. "My health?" She nodded gently. "During your transplant evaluation, we found something unexpected." The room suddenly felt too small. Ethan leaned forward. "What is it?" Dr. Bennett opened another file. "There is a mass on Mrs. Collins's left kidney." Neither of us spoke. "We can't say it's cancer without a biopsy," she continued, "but it's serious enough that we need additional testing immediately." I slowly looked down at my hands. The irony almost made me laugh. I had come to see whether I could save my son's life. Instead, I had learned my own might be in danger. Ethan's face turned completely white. No. He shook his head over and over. No, this can't be happening. He turned toward Dr. Bennett. We're not doing the transplant. Ethan. No. His voice cracked. I'm not risking her life. I looked at him in disbelief. 5 years ago, he had walked away without looking back. Now, he was refusing the only chance that might save him. Dr. Bennett remained calm. We're not making any decisions today. She gathered the papers. The biopsy comes first. As she left the room, silence settled between us. Finally, Ethan whispered. I'm so sorry. I closed my eyes. You've said that. I know. No, Ethan. I looked at him. You don't. He swallowed hard. I thought leaving you would solve everything. What did it solve? Nothing. His voice broke. I lost my marriage. He looked down. I lost my house. Another pause. I lost my children. That sentence hit me harder than anything else. I stared at him. What? Vanessa had left with the children. She moved to Arizona with someone she'd met through work. You never saw them again. He shook his head. I fought for visitation. What happened? I couldn't afford the legal fees. He laughed bitterly. The judge didn't take the side of a bankrupt father living in a rented room. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Life had already punished him in ways I never could. A week later, the biopsy results came back. I sat in Dr. Bennett's office, with Frank on one side and Evelyn on the other. They had insisted on coming. Whatever happens, Evelyn had said, you shouldn't hear it alone. Dr. Bennett smiled before she even spoke. The first genuine smile I'd seen from her. The mass is benign. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. So it's not cancer? No. She nodded. It will still need monitoring, but it isn't life-threatening. Frank quietly whispered. Thank God. For the first time in weeks. Hope entered the room. But hope didn't erase difficult choices. Dr. Bennett explained the risks again. At my age, donating a kidney was possible. But recovery would be longer. There were complications to consider. No guarantees. No promises. When she finished, she looked at me. You don't have to decide today. I surprised everyone. I already have. Ethan immediately shook his head. No. I turned toward him. You don't get to make this decision. Mom, I can't let you. You already made one decision for me. The room fell silent. You made it 5 years ago. His eyes filled with tears. I'm asking to make this one myself. That evening, Ethan asked if we could walk together. We went to the small hospital garden. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, he stopped beside a blooming rose bush. I need to tell you the truth. I folded my arms. I'm listening. He stared at the flowers. The house. I know why you sold it. No. He looked at me. You don't. I frowned. He reached into his jacket and handed me a faded envelope. I've carried this for years. Inside were copies of loan documents, bank statements, and one signature. Not Ethan's. Vanessa's. She had secretly taken out massive business loans using forged financial documents. When everything collapsed, creditors threatened criminal charges. They told us if we couldn't pay quickly. He swallowed. They'd come after everything. So you sold my house. I thought I could buy it back. You promised yourself that. He nodded. I honestly believed it would only be temporary. What changed? The debts kept growing. His shoulders slumped. And every day I waited to come back. I became more ashamed. I looked at the papers again. None of them excused what he'd done. But they explained it. Fear had made him selfish. Shame had kept him away. Neither was love. Neither was hate. Just weakness. Human weakness. The transplant surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks later. News spread through the library. Rachel organized meal deliveries. Frank insisted on driving me to every appointment. Evelyn cleaned my apartment until it looked brand new. Even little Lucy made me a handmade card. On the front, she had drawn 2 stick figures holding hands. Inside it said, "Heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they just love people anyway." I cried before I finished reading it. The morning of the surgery arrived. The hospital hallways were unusually quiet. A nurse helped me onto the bed. As she adjusted the blanket, Ethan entered the room. He looked terrified. He handed me a small wooden box. I found this after Vanessa left. I opened it. Inside was a tiny blue marble. Immediately, I smiled through my tears. "When you were 6, I whispered. You cried because you lost it. You searched the whole yard with me." He nodded. I never forgot. Then he took a deep breath. "If anything happens to you." I reached for his hand. "It won't. But if it does." He couldn't finish. I squeezed his fingers. "For the first time in 5 years. Call me Mom." His lips trembled. "I love you," he whispered. "Mom." The operating room doors opened. The nurses began wheeling us away in opposite directions. I watched him disappear down the hallway, praying that this time he wouldn't leave me again. But neither of us knew that before the day was over, another shocking truth would come to light, one that would change not only Ethan's future, but the future of his children as well. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took over was Ethan's face. Not the frightened little boy who used to hide behind me during thunderstorms. Not the young man who drove away from the bus station. But a broken father, praying for one more chance. Then everything faded to black. When I opened my eyes, the room was quiet except for the soft beeping of a heart monitor. My mouth felt dry. Every part of my body ached. A nurse noticed my eyes opening and smiled. "Welcome back, Mrs. Collins." I tried to speak. She nodded before I could finish. "The surgery went well." Tears rolled down my cheeks before I realized I was crying. "Your son is awake too." I closed my eyes in relief. For the first time in years. Neither of us was running. Recovery wasn't easy. The first few days felt like climbing a mountain while carrying another mountain on my back. Even sitting up hurt. Laughing hurt. Breathing deeply hurt. Every morning, Frank appeared with terrible hospital coffee. "It still tastes awful," he would say. "But tradition matters." Evelyn brought homemade soup that the nurses secretly preferred over the hospital food. Rachel visited after work with library updates. Lucy keeps asking when her favorite librarian is coming back. That made me smile every time. I realized something important. 5 years ago, I thought my family had ended. I had been wrong. Family had simply grown in places I never expected. Ethan recovered more slowly. The years of illness had weakened him. One afternoon, Dr. Sarah Bennett invited us both into a consultation room. "Your bodies are accepting the transplant very well." She smiled. "Now comes the harder part." I looked at her. "Recovery." She nodded. "And rebuilding your lives." Sometimes doctors understand more than medicine. Over the following weeks, Ethan visited my room every day. At first we spoke only about small things. The weather. Hospital food. The nurses. Slowly, the conversations became real. "I remember the day Dad taught me to ride my bike," he said one afternoon. "You ran behind me longer than he did." I didn't trust him. He laughed. "You trusted me." "I always did." The laughter disappeared. "I know." Silence settled between us. Then he quietly asked, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Why did you help me?" I looked out the window. The trees outside had begun turning gold with autumn. "Because if I had let you die." I turned back toward him. "The last thing your father ever asked of me would have died too." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "The night before he passed away." I smiled through tears. "He made me promise something." "What?" "No matter how stubborn our son becomes." I could still hear David's voice. "Never stop reminding him where home is." Ethan covered his face. He cried harder than I had ever seen. 3 months after the surgery, Ethan asked if he could take me somewhere. I hesitated. "Not another bus station." He looked down in shame. "I deserve that." We drove for nearly an hour. When the car finally stopped, I recognized the neighborhood immediately. My old neighborhood. The maple trees had grown taller. Several houses had fresh paint. Children rode bicycles where Ethan once had. My heart pounded. "What are we doing here?" He smiled nervously. "Come with me." We walked halfway down the street. Then I stopped. My old house stood before me. The porch swing. The flower beds. The white shutters. Everything looked almost exactly the same. "I don't understand." Ethan handed me a small envelope. Inside was a single key. "I've been saving every dollar since I got better." He took a deep breath. "I couldn't buy back the years." His voice shook. "But..." He pointed toward the front door. "I bought back your home." I couldn't move. "What?" "The family who owned it decided to relocate. They accepted my offer last month." He smiled through tears. "It's yours again." I stared at the house. The place where birthdays had been celebrated. Where David had laughed. Where Ethan had taken his first steps. I slowly walked onto the porch. My fingers touched the wooden railing. The same tiny scratch from Ethan's skateboard was still there. Time had moved on. But some memories had waited. Just like home. "I don't expect to live here," I whispered. Ethan looked surprised. "You don't?" I smiled. "My life isn't trapped inside these walls anymore." He looked confused. "I loved this house." I turned toward him. "But I found something even more valuable." "What?" "People. Frank. Evelyn. Rachel. Lucy. The neighbors who had become family. My home was never just a building." I gently placed the key back into his hand. "I want us to sell it." His eyes widened. "What?" "And use the money I smiled. To build something your father would have loved. 6 months later, the David Collins Family Learning Center opened inside an old community building near the library. Children came after school for free tutoring. Single parents received job training. Seniors taught woodworking, cooking, sewing, and life skills. A small reading room honored local veterans. On the wall near the entrance hung a simple wooden sign. No one should ever be left behind. Frank managed transportation. Evelyn ran the community kitchen. Rachel organized reading programs. Lucy, now a little taller, proudly volunteered every Saturday. And Ethan worked there every single day. Not because he needed forgiveness. Because he finally understood service. One sunny afternoon, while I was reading to a group of children, 2 little voices interrupted the story. "Excuse me." I looked up. A boy around 10. A little girl about 8. Standing nervously beside a woman from Child Services. My heart skipped. The boy looked exactly like Ethan had at that age. The girl had David's smile. The caseworker smiled warmly. "Mrs. Collins?" "Yes." These 2 asked if they could meet their grandmother. Behind them, Ethan stood frozen. His eyes filled with tears. Vanessa had recently passed away after a long illness, and before she died, she admitted how she had kept the children away. She had also left a letter telling them that, despite her mistakes, their father had never stopped trying to reach them. The little girl stepped forward first. "Are you really Grandma Maggie?" I couldn't answer. I simply opened my arms. She ran into them. Her brother followed a second later. As I held both of them close, I looked over their shoulders at Ethan. He wasn't crying because his life had been saved. He was crying because, after losing almost everything, he had finally found his way home. Epilogue. People often ask me whether I truly forgave my son. They are usually disappointed by my answer. Forgiveness isn't a single moment. It isn't one conversation. It isn't even one sacrifice. It's a road. Some days are easy. Some still hurt. But every morning, Ethan calls before work. Not because he has to. Because he wants to. Every Sunday, my grandchildren help me bake David's old apple pie recipe. Frank still brings terrible coffee. Evelyn still insists everyone takes leftovers home. Lucy now reads chapter books to younger children at the Learning Center. And every year, on the anniversary of that rainy afternoon, Ethan and I visit the old bus station together. We sit on the same wooden bench. We don't go there to remember abandonment. We go there to remember that the worst day of our lives did not become the last chapter of our story. Because sometimes, the people who break your heart become the ones who spend the rest of their lives trying to put the pieces back together. And sometimes, love doesn't erase the past. It simply gives the future a chance.